The summer of 2025 was anticipated to be a turning point, a grand offensive that would tip the scales in favor of Russia. Tens of thousands of soldiers were stationed in the Sumy and Pokrovsk regions, poised for a momentous breakthrough that would lead to Ukraine's defeat. Instead, the result was an abysmal failure. The offensive fizzled out with hardly any territorial gains while incurring devastating losses. As the dust settled, a storm of frustration brewed in the Kremlin. Vladimir Putin was left seething at the ineffectiveness of his armed forces, who failed to fulfill their mission once again. On August 31, United 24 media brought to light a scathing report from the Ukrainian Army's General Staff. This counterattack was in response to Russia's audacious claims of progress. Russia attempted to paint a picture of success during the summer months, but Ukraine swiftly debunked these claims. The General Staff delved into the reality of the situation. While Putin thought he had sent 50,000 soldiers to conquer Sumy and 110,000 to seize Pokrovsk, the truth was far grimmer. A statement released on Telegram sliced through the fog of Russian propaganda. On August 30, a report from the Chief of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces attempted to glorify the results of the spring-summer campaign of 2025. It read, "The reality is that after 3.5 years of relentless aggression, this summer's offensive yielded practically nothing." As we dissect Russia's bold assertions, one can't overlook the staggering statistics that tell a different tale. Nearly 210,000 Russian soldiers have been lost since the beginning of 2025, averaging 26,250 per month and suggesting a catastrophic trajectory that could lead to 315,000 total casualties by year's end. These figures should cause concern, certainly undermining any notion of victory. To add insult to injury, over 2,100 armored vehicles have been obliterated this year. More than 1,200 tanks and around 7,300 artillery systems have also been lost. In the operational zone of the Kursk military district, which combines ongoing defense efforts and attempted offensives in Sumy, Ukrainian forces eliminated over 19,000 enemy fighters and wounded more than 25,000. The human cost adds a layer of sorrow for those who envisioned glory. On August 12, President Volodymyr Zelensky underscored these realities, highlighting that Russian forces suffered losses 3 times greater than Ukraine's daily casualties. He provided specific data for one day: 531 Russian soldiers were killed, 428 wounded, and 9 captured, while Ukraine suffered the loss of 340 soldiers, 18 fatalities amongst them. The grim statistics paint a vivid picture of desperation on one side and resilience on the other. You might wonder, what was the ultimate goal of Russia in this offensive? The answer lingered in the air like a haunting melody. Capturing Pokrovsk was critical, but as the Ukrainian General Staff pointed out, this crucial city remains unclaimed. Instead, Russian troops have failed to secure a single major city during this entire campaign. Despite Russian claims of newfound territories and security zones, the truth is that their control is tenuous at best. Their overinflated success reports sound desperate against the backdrop of Ukraine's counteroffensives that are pushing their forces back, inch by painful inch. The question remains, how long can they maintain this charade? In conclusion, despite their belligerent ambitions, Russia's summer offensive ended up being not a story of triumph, but rather a tale of miscalculation, lost lives, and shattered hope. With each passing day, the haunting specter of defeat looms larger over Putin's war machine, reminding us that in the theater of war, the stakes are played in blood and sorrow, not mere ambition. Previously, we saw that Russia's summer offensive was anything but victorious. Despite fiery declarations and aggressive posturing, the grim reality on the ground told a far different tale. Now, let's peel back the layers of numbers that reveal just how devastating this campaign has been for Russia, and why these figures might haunt Vladimir Putin for a long time. The losses reported by Ukraine paint a bleak picture. Since January 2025 through the end of August, Russia has lost nearly 210,000 soldiers. That breaks down to an average of about 26,000 each month. Even with these staggering losses, there is an uneasy silver lining from Russia's perspective. If this pace continues, the total casualties by the end of the year could hit around 315,000. Alarming? Absolutely. But shockingly, this is over 100,000 fewer than the casualties Russia suffered during 2024, which topped 434,000. Is this survival of sorts a victory? Hardly. These numbers underscore catastrophic human costs that no leader would celebrate. The destruction extends beyond lives. More than 2,100 armored vehicles have been obliterated this year. Among them, over 1,200 tanks, nearly 7,300 artillery pieces, and 157 multiple-launch rocket systems lie in ruin, devoured by relentless battles that show no mercy. The devastation is even more tangible in certain hotspots. Take the operational zone of the Kursk military district, an area where Russia has been both defending and launching attacks. Here, Ukraine claims to have wiped out 19,080 Russian fighters, and left over 25,000 more wounded since the start of the year. Imagine the sound of engines silencing under the weight of wreckage, the earth trembling under artillery fire turning defenses to dust, a summer campaign transforming battlefields into graveyards. These statistics form a chilling reality. Russia's summer offensive ravaged its own forces far more than Ukraine's. President Volodymyr Zelensky highlighted these grim facts on August 12. He exposed a shocking daily toll. On August 11 alone, Russia lost 531 soldiers killed, 428 wounded, and 9 captured. In comparison, Ukraine's losses were significantly lower, with 18 killed, 243 wounded, and 79 missing, totaling 340 casualties that day. What does this mean? The relentless pressure, the thunderous bombardments, and the heat-soaked trenches have all weighed heavier on Russia's shoulders. Every day, their ranks shrink, morale strains, and the dream of dramatic breakthroughs inch further from reality. With losses 3 times greater than those suffered by Ukraine, one must ask, can such a campaign be called an offensive? Or is it a brutal grinding machine fueled by desperation? The numbers don't lie, and neither do the echoes across those embattled fields, the ominous silence after the barrage, the scorched earth, and the relentless march of a conflict Russia hoped to dominate but instead faltered at every step. What will the coming months bring when sustaining such losses becomes nearly impossible? The next question lingers in the smoky air. If Russia's ground troops are bleeding out, what about the weapons, the machines, the battle-worn symbols of might? Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the equipment losses that have drained Russia's campaign dry, turning what should have been a powerful summer push into a devastating quagmire. The summer offensive was supposed to be Russia's answer to its struggles, yet it turned into a devastating miscalculation. On August 11, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky revealed the staggering losses inflicted on Russian forces. While Russia reported the deaths of 531 soldiers, with 428 wounded and 9 taken captive, Ukraine faced significantly fewer casualties, losing 340 soldiers with only 18 killed. This glaring disparity painted a stark picture. Amid this chaos, Russia's fixation on capturing the strategic city of Pokrovsk was critical. Capturing it would sever a key Ukrainian supply line and bring Putin closer to his ambition of taking over Donetsk. Yet, Pokrovsk stood resilient. The Ukrainian General Staff proclaimed that no major city had fallen under Russian control, despite the extravagant assertions from Valery Gerasimov, the chief of the General Staff of Russia's armed forces. Such claims felt hollow. Days earlier, a report from the Royal United Services Institute highlighted a troubling reality for Putin. The offensive aimed not merely to seize territory but to bolster Russia's negotiating power for future peace talks with Ukraine. Tensions were high, and the stakes even higher as the dreams of a swift victory crumbled. Interestingly, Dr. Jack Wadling pointed out that Russia's strategy hinged on overreaching demands, expecting Ukraine to concede vast parts of the Donbas region. However, without the military leverage to enforce these demands, Russia found itself in a precarious position. Would this defeat ultimately cost Putin not only territory but also his grip on power? The situation was dire as Ukrainian forces continued to mount counterattacks, leaving the fate of the summer offensive hanging precariously in the balance. What could happen next in this unfolding drama? Earlier, we explored how Russia's summer offensive aimed not just at grabbing land but at gaining leverage for future peace talks. The plan hinged on extreme demands, like forcing Ukraine to surrender nearly all of the Donbass region. Yet, the reality showed Putin lacked the bargaining power to make those demands stick. Now, let's dig deeper into why this offensive was doomed from the start. Dr. Jack Wadling warned back then, Russia wanted to ramp up attacks to pressure Ukraine during negotiations, but this pressure had a ticking clock. They called it the summer offensive, not just an offensive, because there was no time to waste. Putin needed swift results to avoid sabotage from U.S. leaders pushing for a ceasefire that year. The Kremlin had soldiers to throw into the fray, but these forces had to deliver victories fast. Instead, they faltered spectacularly. The critical leverage Putin craved vanished, an empty prize amid stubborn resistance. Putin's strategy zeroed in on two crucial objectives. First, establish a buffer zone around Sumy. According to reports on May 27, this zone would act like an iron shield, blocking Ukraine from repeating the stunning August 2024 counterattack that reclaimed Russian-held Kursk territory for the first time since World War II. That Ukrainian strike was a public humiliation for Putin and forced thousands of Russian troops to fight for lost ground. A buffer zone meant Putin could claim any future negotiations were grounded in preventing such humiliations again. The second, even more vital target was Pokrovsk. This city was more than a dot on a map, it was a key logistical hub, heart of supply lines crucial to Ukraine's hold over Donetsk. Capturing Pokrovsk would give Russia a major foothold and stab deep into Ukraine's eastern defenses, paving the way towards seizing Chasiv Yar and other parts of Donbass. The city's fall would deliver a blow comparable to opening a floodgate. But here's the twist, despite all this build-up and grim determination, neither goal was achieved. The buffer zone remained a fragile claim, and Pokrovsk held firm under fire. The consequences? Putin's grand plan unraveled, leaving his forces exposed and devoid of the leverage he desperately needed. What happened next? We'll uncover the staggering losses suffered, and just how far Russia's claims diverged from the battlefield reality. Could Putin's so-called summer offensive be anything but a costly, humiliating defeat? The shocking details await. Previously, we explored why Pokrovsk is a crucial prize for both sides and how its capture would open the path for Russia to advance deeper into Donetsk and other parts of the Donbass. The scene was set for Russia's grand summer offensive with big ambitions, but what did this offensive truly achieve? Russia claims that it has carved out security zones in the Sumy and Kharkiv regions, larger buffer areas meant to secure gains. But Ukraine's general staff dismisses these claims as wildly exaggerated attempts to cover up painful setbacks. These so-called security zones exist more on paper than on the battlefield. The truth paints a far grimmer picture of massive Russian losses and shattered tactics. Moscow also boasts that its summer push destroyed Ukraine's missile industry. An audacious claim, especially as Ukraine has already announced the development of a new long-range missile named Flamingo. How could the missile industry be wiped out when fresh weapons are rolling off the assembly lines? It appears that the Kremlin's boasts are smoke and mirrors at best. Russia further touts a series of precision strikes on military targets. The vagueness is telling, these targets often turn out to be civilian sites and urban centers, hiding behind military jargon to dodge blame. Ukraine's officials call these euphemisms out, revealing the real human and cultural cost of these so-called strikes. The final blow comes from a scathing summary by the Ukrainian General Staff. They label General Valery Gerasimov's report a laundry list of inflated triumphs and deceptive narratives. Despite relentless pressure, Ukrainian forces stand firm, inflicting heavy blows and proving that Russia's spring-summer 2025 offensive resolved nothing. When laid side by side with the original objectives, forming a strong buffer zone in Sumy and capturing Pokrovsk, the Russian claims crumble. Even the much-heralded security zone in Sumy is more myth than reality. Ukrainian counterattacks relentlessly chip away at Russian positions. On August 16, Ukraine reported pushing Russian troops back roughly 1.2 miles. This was just one of many efforts eroding Russia's fragile gains. So, what drives Moscow to overstate successes while its soldiers bleed on the front? Can Russia hold on to any ground, or is this offensive destined to become just another chapter of failed ambitions? And how much longer can Putin count on pressure to translate into real leverage? The answer remains elusive, but one thing is clear: Russia's grand summer gamble has landed in ruin. What lies ahead may be even more uncertain than what's left behind. The battle for Sumy continues, and with each counterstrike, Ukraine dares to chip away at what little Russia has taken. Will this momentum hold? The coming weeks hold the key. The situation in Sumy is far from secure for Russia, despite its claims. The reality is that the control it has asserted is tenuous at best. In a shocking turn of events on August 16, forces from Ukraine managed to push Russian troops back by approximately 1.2 miles. This victory marked just one instance in a series of successful maneuvers aimed at erasing the small territorial gains Russia had made during the summer. In an operation that stunned military observers, Ukrainian forces successfully targeted a high-ranking Russian general, resulting in significant disruption among Russian units trying to break deeper into Sumy. With this decisive action, any illusions of a security zone evaporated. Russia may have made some territorial advances, but they are nowhere near sufficient to establish the protective barrier Putin so desperately needs between Sumy and Kursk. The ground acquired is rapidly being retaken by Ukraine's persistent counteroffensives, effectively nullifying Russia's summer ambitions in the region. As for Pokrovsk, while it loomed large in Russia's strategies, it has increasingly become a point of contention instead of victory. The city notably registered as a focus during late July and early August when Russian forces made a dangerous advance into its outskirts. Although they managed to infiltrate, they failed to secure their hold before Ukraine could act and close the gap, leaving those soldiers isolated and vulnerable. With a few remaining Russian troops within Pokrovsk now eliminated, Ukraine has gained even more momentum. Russia's plan to capture Pokrovsk involved taking control of the smaller settlements surrounding the city. This would enable their forces to launch coordinated attacks from multiple sides. Initially, Ukraine underestimated the threat posed by these surrounding areas, but the tide has turned. Following their successful closing of the salient that once allowed Russian incursions, Ukraine has now committed its elite forces to reclaim these lost territories. Their tenacity signals that Pokrovsk remains a fierce battleground, and Russia's aspirations continue to falter amidst relentless Ukrainian resolve. What will happen next as Russia's relentless pursuit of Pokrovsk continues? Will they finally secure a significant victory, or are they destined for defeat once again? Stay tuned as the conflict unfolds. The summer of 2025 was meant to mark a decisive turning point in the ongoing conflict. A grand offensive where Russia would reap the rewards of strategic planning and overwhelming numbers. An astonishing array of tens of thousands of troops was mobilized in the Sumy and Pokrovsk regions, signaling what many expected to be a transformative push against Ukraine. However, the reality shattered those expectations. The summer offensive sputtered into a resounding failure, yielding minimal territorial gains and devastating losses for Russian forces. As the dust settled, Vladimir Putin's disappointment boiled over. His troops, who were expected to carve out new victories, instead returned with little more than a stack of grim statistics. On August 31, findings from United 24 media revealed the harsh truth: despite Russia's steadfast claims, the outcome was anything but successful. Ukraine's general staff took to Telegram to expose the discrepancies in Russian reports, a futile attempt to masquerade an embarrassing defeat as a strategic success. When these operations finished, the numbers told an unsettling tale. Since the beginning of 2025, nearly 210,000 Russian soldiers had perished in the combat, averaging a staggering loss of about 26,250 every month. If those figures remain steady, by year's end, Russia would see over 315,000 casualties, a sharp contrast to the previous year's greater toll. Yet, could anyone truly call that a victory? Further compounding Russia's plight was the staggering loss of military resources. The battlefield transformed into a graveyard for over 2,100 armored vehicles, exceeding 1,200 tanks, and 7,300 artillery systems, reducing the once formidable military machine to a shadow of its former self. Specific sectors bore the brunt of this struggle. In the Kursk military district, Ukraine reported eliminating over 19,000 enemy fighters while injuring upwards of 25,000, showcasing the human cost of this disastrous offensive. How did Russia end up in such a bleak situation? A significant factor was their mission to capture the vital city of Pokrovsk, a logistical linchpin for Ukraine. In their ambitious plans, Russian leaders believed that securing this city would allow them to dominate critical supply routes, ultimately forging a path to claim more territory in the Donbas region. But as fortune would have it, Pokrovsk remained resilient, with no major cities succumbing to Russian control. In a twist of fate, despite Vladimir Gerasimov's optimistic proclamations about the offensive, Ukraine's counteroffensives began to reveal the gaps in Russia's strategy. Ukraine mobilized elite forces to reclaim the lost territories around Pokrovsk, undermining any initial Russian successes. As if this wasn't enough, the strategic failure also set the stage for tense international dynamics. Throughout this period, U.S. President Donald Trump, who had been striving for a ceasefire, faced increasing frustration with the ongoing Russian aggression. Just 2 weeks post a seemingly positive meeting in Alaska between him and Putin, the drone strikes continued unabated, reigniting simmering tensions. With no buffer zone in sight and the coveted Pokrovsk still standing strong, the stakes couldn't have been higher. As summer faded, the inescapable truth emerged. Russia's summer offensive had not only backfired but left Putin scrambling for leverage in negotiations that seemed ever more elusive. Given the staggering losses and unfulfilled ambitions, one must wonder, what was the reasoning behind Russia's failed summer offensive? What miscalculations led to this untenable situation, and how might its unfolding implications reshape the future of the conflict? The answers lie buried within the shattered expectations and the blood-soaked ground of those who fell in a campaign that promised so much but delivered so little. Earlier, we saw how Russia's plan hinged on slowly capturing smaller villages around Pokrovsk to cut it off completely. This approach made perfect sense. Every settlement taken weakened the city's defenses and tightened the noose. But what happened next shattered this strategy. Although Russia managed to push into Pokrovsk briefly by forming a small protrusion into the city, that fragile gain has since collapsed. What went wrong? Instead of holding these nearby villages tightly and building momentum, Russian forces lost them almost as quickly as they were won. This failure to surround Pokrovsk means there's no tightening grip, no encirclement, and without that, the defenders in the city remain strong. Experts interviewed on August 28 emphasized this point. Pavlo Lekichuk, a security expert, explained the broader risk. Russian generals had hoped this breakthrough would trigger a cascade of Ukraine's defenses breaking down across the entire front line, especially in the northern Donbas region. That was their calculation, their domino effect plan to reshape the battlefield. But the exact opposite unfolded. Russian troops couldn't consolidate their positions. Gains melted away like sand slipping through fingers. The summer offensive was supposed to secure these footholds firmly enough to prepare for winter. In summer, armored tanks, mechanized vehicles, and even motorcycles can maneuver swiftly, giving an edge. Once freezing temperatures arrive, the terrain becomes a deadly frozen trap, limiting movement severely. Russia's plan was to turn those captured settlements into springboards for brutal urban battles inside Pokrovsk itself when winter came. Now, with their summer effort unraveling, Russia finds itself not just failing to capture Pokrovsk, but also barred from setting the stage for a winter offensive. The city remains fiercely defended, and Russia's hold around it is slipping away. The question looms, with the clock ticking toward winter, how can this campaign still succeed if the very foundations, those smaller villages, are lost before the crucial cold season even begins? The fate of this battle hangs on a knife's edge. In a summer that promised immense military momentum, Russia stood at a crossroads. poised to launch an offensive that would reshape the battlefield in Ukraine. With tens of thousands of soldiers amassed in strategic regions, the summer of 2025 was envisioned as a decisive moment, one that would swing the tide in favor of Russia. Yet, as the dust settled, it was clear that those ambitions were crushed beneath the weight of incompetence and poor planning. Instead of the anticipated breakthroughs, Russian forces found themselves bogged down, grappling with fierce resistance and mounting casualties. Reports from the Ukrainian General Staff painted a grim picture, revealing that Russia's summer offensive was a staggering failure, with only minimal territorial gains. The expected invasion into the gritty urban heart of Pokrovsk remained an unfulfilled dream. By August 31, United 24 media highlighted the disparity between Russia's claims of success and the stark reality on the ground. The Ukrainian forces effectively dismantled Russia's narrative with their own detailed assertions, revealing that nearly 210,000 Russian soldiers had been lost since the start of 2025, a staggering toll that defied any notion of triumph. Could it be that the loudest claims masked the deepest failures? As tension simmered, the chilling sounds of artillery and the whirling blades of reconnaissance drones filled the air, a constant reminder of the deadly game being played out on the front lines. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky drew attention to the alarming statistics which showed that for every 531 Russian soldiers who died in a typical day, Ukraine lost only a fraction, 340. This asymmetrical toll revealed the heart-wrenching reality of war. The screams of the fallen were drowned out by the desperate cries of those left behind. What added insult to injury for Russia was their inability to seize key urban centers. Despite reaching the outskirts, they did not capture Pokrovsk, which was becoming a critical point for both sides. Imagine the bitter irony, a summer saturated with hopes for conquest ending instead in disarray, with Russian forces failing to establish a foothold for continued operations. Their dreams of transforming captured territories into launching pads for winter offensives evaporated like mist in the morning sun. The strategic blunders didn't stop there. Russia's attempts to cross treacherous rivers became a recurring theme of misfortune. Vital bridges, crucial for troop movements and supplies, fell under the vigilant eyes of Ukrainian drones. With every failed crossing, Russian forces found themselves trapped in a cycle of ambushes and attrition, their original plan slipping further from reach. As military analysts pointed out, the crux of the issue lay in Russia's dwindling capabilities. They were no longer executing massive assaults but had resorted to small, disorganized skirmishes that left them vulnerable. They quite simply didn't have the manpower, the equipment, or the firepower to make advances, thwarting their aspirations and leaving behind a trail of defeat and despair. As the summer ended with a somber twilight, the shadows of Russian soldiers lingered, remnants of an offensive that promised glory but instead became a lesson in hubris. Would they ever learn from these crushing setbacks? Would the winter bring fresh resolve or deeper despair? As the chill of approaching confrontation beckoned, one question loomed large: how could such grand ambitions lead to such historic failures? The battlefield had shifted, and the stakes were higher than ever. In the midst of summer chaos, Russia's grand offensive faltered spectacularly. A surge of tens of thousands, gathered in the Sumy and Pokrovsk regions, was anticipated to shift the balance of power, but as the dust settled, it became evident, Russia faced a grim reality. The summer of 2025 would not be marked by triumph, but by staggering losses and embarrassing failures, with only minimal territory gained. As August drew to a close, United 24 media brought to light the stark truth articulated by Ukraine's General Staff. Russia, in a desperate bid to save face, sought to depict its summer offensive as a success. Yet the Ukrainian response was relentless, exposing the futility of Russia's claims. After 3.5 years of aggression, they declared, this seasonal offensive yielded practically nothing. What did Russia proclaim? They boasted of territorial gains in regions like Sumy, but the truth was laid bare. Ukraine reported horrific losses for Russia, estimating the toll at nearly 210,000 soldiers by the end of August alone. As the battle cry echoed across the fields, Russian camps were harshly reminded of their dwindling forces, averaging approximately 26,250 casualties each month. This alarming trend, if continued, could lead to a staggering total of 315,000 by year's end. Is this what victory looks like? Yet, it's not just the lives lost. Russia's armored divisions crumbled under fire. An alarming figure of over 2,100 armored vehicles destroyed, more than 1,200 tanks incapacitated, and roughly 7,300 artillery systems rendered useless painted a tapestry of despair. In the Kursk military district, a grim tally showed over 19,000 Russian fighters eliminated alongside 25,000 injured. Could there be a more revealing indictment of Russian strategy? President Volodymyr Zelensky underscored this disarray, illustrating how Russia lost 3 times as many soldiers daily compared to Ukraine. On a seemingly regular day, August 11, Russia faced a staggering 531 fatalities, while Ukraine mourned just 18. Were the Kremlin's grand ambitions, a major city capture, which would disrupt Ukrainian logistics, now moot? With Pokrovsk still firmly in Ukrainian hands, the hopes of claiming the land had evaporated. The General Staff statement echoed loudly, no major city had capitulated. What of Valery Gerasimov's claims of success? They were viewed as empty words, a facade hiding the cruel truth. Ukraine's counteroffensive efforts constantly pushed Russian forces back, deflating any pretensions of progress. Putin's expectations had spiraled into a quagmire. The early summer strategies were ripe for failure. Dr. Jack Wattling noted that aspirations were less about seizing key territories and more about bargaining chips for future negotiations. With the pressing need for immediate results, how could Putin endure the fallout when peace negotiations commenced anew? The second objective of establishing a buffer zone in Sumy was only a mirage. Despite aggressive measures to prevent another Ukrainian incursion, any perceived security was fragile, as Ukraine's counterstrikes relentlessly advanced. Russia's hope for a foothold faded against the backdrop of dwindling resources and unresolved challenges. Despite proclamations of victories and territorial claims, Ukraine's General Staff was quick to ridicule these assertions. The supposed security zones in Sumy were grossly exaggerated, as Ukraine reclaimed ground inch by inch. Would the looming winter amplify Russia's vulnerabilities, bringing more oppressive challenges? As the curtain fell on the summer offensive, questions of capability and effectiveness lingered in the air. The anticipated gains had turned to dust, leaving behind a narrative not of triumph, but disillusionment. What does the next chapter hold for a beleaguered Russia, facing an enemy that refuses to yield? The answer remains shrouded in uncertainty. The summer of 2025 had been billed as the decisive turning point. With an army of tens of thousands gathered in the Sumy and Pokrovsk regions, Russia planned an ambitious offensive aimed at crushing Ukraine once and for all. Instead, it met with dismal failure, suffering staggering losses while achieving scant territorial gains. The pride of Vladimir Putin took another hit, as he found his troops once again unable to deliver the results he desperately sought. On August 31, United 24 Media published a striking report. The Ukrainian Army's General Staff swiftly countered Russia's claims of success regarding its summer offensive, labeling them as nothing more than fabrications. The truth was painted in grim figures. Nearly 210,000 Russian soldiers had been lost since the start of the year, an average of 26,250 every month. To make matters worse, casualty estimates projected that the number could climb to 315,000 by year's end. Were these figures indicative of a victorious summer campaign? Absolutely not. Ukraine's General Staff highlighted further grim details: more than 2,100 pieces of armored equipment obliterated, over 1,200 tanks destroyed, and massive losses in artillery systems. The ongoing struggles in the Kursk military district made it evident that Russia faced relentless challenges. In just this operational zone, Ukrainian forces eradicated over 19,000 enemy fighters. How then could Russia claim any semblance of victory when Ukraine was inflicting 3 times the casualties with each day that passed? August 11 became a notorious mark in this grim tale. That day, Russia reported losses of 531 soldiers while inflicting just 340 casualties on Ukraine. Only 18 Ukrainians were killed, revealing the lopsided nature of the confrontation. The stakes were high, but Russia's ambition to capture the crucial city of Pokrovsk, a goal necessary for disrupting Ukrainian logistics, remained unrealized. In the adverse light of reality, Russia had not taken control of any major cities, contrary to the extravagant claims made by its military leaders. As the summer offensive faltered, the chief architect of the Russian forces, General Valery Gerasimov, issued statements filled with bravado and falsehoods. The Ukrainian counterarguments were lethal in their accuracy, driving home the reality that Russia's ambitions had not only been thwarted, they had crumbled under the weight of mismanagement and denial. Putin's goals were to establish a buffer zone in Sumy and to seize Pokrovsk. While the intentions were clear, the execution left much to be desired. With the crucial river crossings and logistical routes under constant threat from Ukrainian forces, Russia found its supply lines vulnerable. The loss of bridges hampered troop movements, making it all too easy for Ukraine to set up ambushes and exploit the chaos. Stripped of the capability for large-scale assaults, Russian forces relied more on small, poorly coordinated units that couldn't maintain the necessary pressure. The deadlock in the military campaign became painfully obvious as Ukrainian defenses held strong, thwarting any attempts to breach significant territories. Could Putin maintain his grip as the season transitioned into the challenges of autumn and winter? The questions lingered, echoing in the hearts of those who witnessed the unfolding drama. The ambitious summer offensive had withered away, crumbling under the duress of Ukrainian ingenuity and resolve. As the battlefield shifted beneath their feet, Ukraine began reshaping the dynamics in ways Russia had not foreseen. Ignoring the storm brewing in the distance, Putin seemed isolated, surrounded by ineptitude and crumbling dreams. The next rounds of peace negotiations would soon reveal the true cost of his failed ambitions. Would Russia be ready to deal with the consequences of this failure? The countdown to the inevitable began.